Coming up on Bridge City News, we hear from the mayor following his meeting with the ministers of health and municipal affairs about the consolidation of EMS dispatch. Plus, are you in the market for a new car? Beware, a new study is released on virtual vehicle scams. And is COVID-19 in its second wave? The Prime Minister says yes, but Canada's Chief Public Health Officer says no. We hear from Brian Lilly, who weighs in on the conflict.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Bierman has returned from Edmonton following a meeting with the mayors of Red Deer, Calgary, and Wood Buffalo, who all suggest the government's plan to consolidate 911 dispatch services will put lives at risk. All four mayors met with Alberta's Health Minister Tyler Shandro, who said he would review the mayor's concerns and said he would, quote, consider their proposal, but soon after released a statement saying he's still on board with the centralized system. The province says it would save money and make the EMS dispatch service more efficient. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi says 911 dispatch should be operated at the municipal level because local knowledge and integration with fire services can't be overlooked if safety is to be of top priority. Today, Mayor Chris Bierman shared with the media his main concerns on a local level. He says that the bottom line is to ensure EMS services in Lethbridge are available and response times aren't affected. He also provided specific examples of how response times could be longer with a centralized system.
Recently, there was an incident at Henderson Lake Park where someone collapsed. They were unconscious, and the people called 911. And the answer, when it was answered, they said, "Where are you?" They said, "Henderson Lake Park." And they said, "What city's that?" And then when they said Lethbridge, they said, "Well, what's the physical address?" They said, "Gunnery Point." And they said, "What's the physical address? What's the number? What's the street number?" So those types of responses delay. There was a second incident involved where someone at the Legion was involved. And again, it went to centralized dispatch, and the response was, we said, "Where are you?" "At the Legion." And he said, "What's the physical address?" And you can see that in Lethbridge, if it's handled by EMS dispatch in Lethbridge, the folks in Lethbridge know.
The Lethbridge Police Crime Suppression Team, with help from several LPS units, had to deal with a high-risk incident on the city's south side last evening. While conducting a search warrant for drugs in a home in the 800 block of 16th Street South, police located several packages of concern, including explosive materials and devices. The explosives disposal unit was called in to ensure the safety of all. Members of the public were asked to avoid the area, and neighboring residents were asked to evacuate. 5 people were arrested, and the explosive materials and devices were located.
There was one person that was charged with multiple offenses. We found improvised explosive devices in the residence. We had our explosive disposal unit come to the scene. 2 of them needed to be rendered safe on site. Another 5 were able to be safely removed from the home, and those were destroyed today. 2 years ago, this person also was convicted of an offense for having an explosive device. So we have the same person, repeat behavior, and there's no need to have explosive devices. This person is not in that industry where he would need it, and certainly in your home in a residential area, size doesn't really matter. It's going to be a concern for the entire neighborhood.
There's been an increase in fentanyl-related deaths in our city. According to the Government of Alberta's Opioid Response Surveillance Report, there were 21 opioid-related deaths in the first 2 quarters of 2020, while there were only a total of 16 deaths in all of 2019. BCN spoke with Lethbridge Police Service about their concerns.
Any overdose in the city, whether it's fentanyl or otherwise, I mean, we're concerned about that. We're doing our best to combat the trafficking of illicit drugs. And of course, it's a social problem where we're trying to work with our partners, get people off the drugs, get them clean so that they're, safer for one, but also going to contribute more to society. What we send to the lab has come back as fentanyl, where at times we are of the belief that maybe it was carfentanil. Here in Lethbridge, the majority has been fentanyl.
This week marks Reconciliation Week, which recognizes the anniversary of the signing of Treaty 7 in 1877. Treaty 7 is an agreement between Canadian Crown and First Nations in southern Alberta. To commemorate this, Alpha House hosted a special lunch at the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen. BCN's Loris Alexander has the story.
Today was a memorial for homeless individuals that have passed away since January 2020.
We get to know these people. We know who they are. We know their names. We have provided meals for them for all these years, and to see them simply disappear as they do is difficult for all of us, our staff and our other guests. And so I think it's really important not to let them just slip away without being noticed or without being remembered. And so this is really a remembrance service of those who have succumbed to the issues that they're facing in life, and it's difficult, and so I think it really helps everyone to sort of have a bit of a closure to it.
People need to start trying to figure a way to become part of the solution rather than pointing fingers or laying blame. In order for these people to begin their journey to healing, we need to bridge connection with these individuals.
After a moment of silence was observed at 11 a.m., guests enjoyed a special meal put on by Alpha House Lethbridge in partnership with the Soup Kitchen.
Alpha House has partnered with us to put together a meal of fry bread and Indian tacos, which is a favorite. A lot of people today, and so there's excitement in the air. And I guess like most services like that, it's nice to wrap it up with a meal, and that's what we did.
Many guests were happy with the meaning behind today's lunch and memorial service, paying tribute to friends they've lost along the way.
What brings me here is the community, the involvement, the sense of self-belonging, and bridging the gap with these wonderful individuals. The most wonderful thing that has ever happened. It just warms my heart. Like, this is out to our sisters, the ones that passed away and murdered, and Indigenous women. This is for everyone in general.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Thank you, Loris. Arts Days is in full swing in Lethbridge, and the gallery at CASA has new exhibits on daily. They are featuring 6 exhibits, with one standing out called Fall or Fell, which showcases a 24-foot crochet skeleton on display.
And we're now looking at the crocheted sculpture Fall or Fell by Chanel Papp. And Chanel Papp is a well-respected national artist that works primarily with textiles, fabric, sculpture, and installation. And this 24-foot crocheted skeleton is a reflection on mortality. So much in our culture, we don't really talk about or have dialogues around mortality and death, so this sculpture is a way to sort of elicit that conversation.
The 24-foot crochet skeleton will be on display to the public at CASA until October 24th, right before Halloween. Well, last week, the U of L Pronghorns head assistants women's soccer coaches were let go. The news comes after it was discovered that the team was suspended because of a breach in COVID-19 sport cohorts. It was announced Thursday that Lethbridge College women's soccer head coach Sean Carey will be the interim head coach for the Pronghorns. Carey says he's hoping to make 2020 as stress-free as possible for the girls.
You know, I know for the fact that a lot of my athletes don't enjoy the online, they like the hands-on. So I think the stress of that, trying to pass, because they still have to keep up all their academic criteria to be playing soccer. So I think being able to get them on the field, getting them, just touching a ball around teammates, have a bit of a fun thing, and just, have a release, and they can forget about some of the stresses for a while.
The U of L Pronghorns say they plan on completing a comprehensive search for new coaches. RCMP say they have made a second national security arrest in Calgary. Spokesman Fraser Logan confirmed that one person was arrested and said more details will be released in the coming days. The arrest comes 2 months after an alleged former ISIS member was taken into custody in Calgary. Hussein Sobhi Borhout, who faces terrorism charges, allegedly left Canada in 2013, joined ISIS, and returned home in 2014. Alberta's Chief Medical Officer of Health says a second wave of COVID-19 has not hit the province despite increased daily case numbers. Dr. Dina Hinshaw says there were 158 new cases reported in the province yesterday, but that isn't a surge. She says the numbers in Alberta have been relatively stable. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau painted a bleaker picture in a national address Wednesday, saying a second wave is already underway in Canada's 4 largest provinces, referring to Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Alberta. Hinshaw says Thanksgiving in Alberta is not going to be the same as it would be pre-pandemic, but it can still happen as long as people show a proper amount of caution. So this begs the question, is COVID-19 in its second wave? The Prime Minister says yes, but health officers say no. We spoke with Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly to get his take on this conflicting information.
I know that some local medical experts, the Chief Medical Officer of Ottawa has said that they're in the second wave, despite the fact that they have fewer cases than Toronto, based on population, based on per capita, they're doing much worse. It's one of the hotspots for the whole country. So yes, localized, you could say that, but I don't think that the Prime Minister should be going on national television and saying that to the entire country. It sends the wrong message. And, few people pointed out to me, the last time he told us we couldn't get together with our families for a holiday, he did the exact opposite.
You can catch the full interview with Brian Lilly and Hal Roberts coming up after business news. With the Canada Emergency Response Benefit expiring tomorrow, the Conservatives tried pushing for a parliament to sit through the weekend to debate new COVID-19 aid legislation, but they failed in their attempt. Conservative House Leader Gerard Deltel says the provisions in the bill demand detailed and urgent scrutiny, but isn't saying if his party supports the measures. Bill C-2 would create a new benefits regime to support those who have lost jobs due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the Liberals increasing the planned minimum benefit for people whose work is disrupted by COVID-19 is the product of NDP demands. He says the NDP isn't quite satisfied yet with how easily workers will be able to get a sick leave benefit, but he's hopeful.
We have legislation now in front of us, which we take as a major victory for people. The first part of it is exactly what we had asked for. We had said before that we wanted this Liberal government not to cut the help to Canadians. And their initial proposal was to cut the help to Canadians that workers receive from $2,000 to $1,600 as they transition from CERB to a modified continued form of support. The Liberal proposal was to cut the help by $400. We fought back and we forced the government to continue that support at $2,000. Which is a big victory for Canadians.
Deputy Conservative leader Candice Bergen demanded Prime Minister Justin Trudeau account for the limited testing capacity for COVID-19.
Last March, the Prime Minister promised that rapid COVID testing for Canadians would be a top priority. Half a year and $500 billion later, Canadian families still have to wait in line for hours and sometimes days to get tested. Why is the Prime Minister failing Canadians on this vital test during the pandemic?
Trudeau says the Liberal government has done everything possible to approve new test technologies and support the use of existing ones. A service was held in the Statuary Hall at the U.S. Capitol building today for late U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The service was filled with mainly women and Democrats who heard Rabbi Lauren Holtzblatz praise Ginsburg for changing the course of American law, quote, brick by brick, case by case. Ginsburg, who died last week at 87, is the first woman in American history to be granted the honor of lying in state at the Capitol. Well, there is something for everyone at the Mill this weekend, including True Grit, the original Footloose movie with Kevin Bacon, and part 2 of the Matrix trilogy, The Matrix Reloaded. With more, here's Len Binning with the Movie Mill Minute.
True Grit is a Western starring Josh Brolin as an outlaw who kills the father of a 14-year-old girl, who then turns around and hires Rooster Coburn, played by Jeff Bridges, to seek vengeance.
Later gotta cut you down.
Jenny's here! Help me, Marshall!
Now what, Cogburn?
Them boys don't think about the wrath that's about to set down on them. Jack and his gang are a rough lot.
We're going back to the 80s and we present Footloose starring Kevin Bacon. He's just moved from Chicago to a small town and he's horrified to find out that dancing and rock music are outlawed. The Matrix Reloaded continues the story of freedom fighters Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus as they continue their onslaught against the machines.
What if the prophecy is true? What if tomorrow the war could be over? Isn't that worth fighting for? Isn't that worth dying for?
We should be seeing a decent looking weekend in front of us, and temperatures will be soaring back up into the mid-20s next week. We'll have a full look at weather coming right up after the break. Stay with us. And here's a look at our weather around the region and across the nation. We'll see some clearing skies this evening with an overnight low of 9 degrees. Into Saturday, lots of sunshine and 15 degrees. We could see some wind gusts as well from the southwest. Mix of sun and cloud for Sunday with a high of 16. A lovely 25-degree day on Monday under sunny skies. A mix of sun and cloud expected for Tuesday with a high of 16 degrees. 23 is our high for Wednesday with sunshine. That sunshine's going to last through next Thursday with a high of 26 degrees. Now, according to the almanac, the average high for this time of year, 18 degrees. The average low, 4. Our record high on this day was back in 2001. It was 33 degrees. And our low temperature was in 1972. It was -9. We had an exact 12-hour day of daylight today with sun rising this morning at 7:23 a.m. Our sunset this evening, 7:23 p.m. Look at that. Not too often you get an actual 12-hour day of sunlight. Over to the west coast, Victoria and Vancouver could see a mix of sun and cloud with periods of rain, high of 16 in Victoria, 14 expected to be the high in Vancouver. 17 is our high in Edmonton tomorrow under sunny skies. Calgary, sunshine, and 15 could see some wind gusts as well. Periods of rain and windy in both Saskatoon and Regina. Tomorrow, 12 degrees is the high for Saskatoon, 18 for Regina, 20 degrees is the high in Winnipeg with a 60% chance of showers and a risk of a thunderstorm. Over into central Canada, a mix of sun and cloud expected for both Toronto and Ottawa. Toronto's high 26, 25 for Ottawa. Montreal's high 24 under sunny skies. As we get over into Atlantic Canada, some nice temperatures here as well. 25 the high for Fredericton with a mix of sun and cloud. Scattered clouds also expected in Charlottetown with a high of 21. Halifax high 22 under sunny skies, and lots of sunshine expected in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 15 degrees. Vancouver-based social media management platform Hootsuite says a broad, emotional, and passionate reaction from its employees has prompted it to terminate a contract with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In an email, Chief Executive Tom Kaiser tells staff he reversed the decision because the issue created a divided company, and it's not the kind of business he wanted to lead. Other tech companies have previously faced backlash from staff when considering contracts with ICE, who they allege has been involved with human rights and immigration abuses. California plans to ban the sale of gasoline-powered passenger cars and trucks in 15 years. Governor Gavin Newsom on Wednesday ordered state regulators to develop new rules that would make California the first state to ban sales of new gas-powered cars. Newsom's plan would not stop people from owning such vehicles or selling them in the used car market, but it would prevent the sale of new ones beginning in 2035. Taking advantage of consumers that are just looking to buy a vehicle, that's what the Better Business Bureau says scammers are doing after they released a new study on virtual vehicle scams taking place. As Micah Quinn explains, these scams are taking place on online platforms where people are wiring money without seeing a vehicle in person and can't seem to pass up on deals that seem to be too good to be true.
According to a new study done by the Better Business Bureau, they are getting reports from hundreds of Canadians who are seeing a vehicle they like online, they agree with the seller to buy it, and then send money to the seller. The problem is, the vehicle never existed in the first place.
But when they try to buy online, after sending money or part of the cost for the vehicle, they end up not getting a vehicle at all. And it could be a vehicle that's within the borders of our country or outside. It could be either way, but people are losing anywhere from $3,000 to $30,000. People are buying cars, they're buying RVs, they're buying trucks.
The scammers are advertising on websites like Craigslist and Kijiji.
Anyone can go on and advertise a vehicle for sale. And when they advertise, what the scammers do is they'll usually tell you you have to make payment through a third-party escrow company. And that company, which is usually fake, what they tell you is that the company will hold the money until you get the vehicle, then they will release the money to them, the seller, who is a scammer.
Thomas says if you are shopping online for vehicles, make sure to do your research. With the highest number of reported losses, according to the BBB, aged 55 to 64. Also,
if you realize the seller is having stories of why they need to sell the vehicle. So maybe they say someone has died, a son, a husband, and this vehicle is bringing up painful memories. They're just playing on your emotions there.
For more information, you can visit the Better Business Bureau website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 153 points to 16,065. The Dow was up 358 points to 27,173. The S&P 500 was up 51.87 to 32.98. The Nasdaq was up 241.29 to 10,913. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 27 cents to 40.04 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 11 cents to 2.13. Gold was down 6.49 to 18.68 US an ounce. Silver was down 26 cents to 22.89 US an ounce. Wheat is at $240 per metric ton. Barley is at $237. Canola at $514. Corn is at $257 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 88 cents to $111.40. Feeder cattle were down $1.95 to $140.33. Lean hogs were up $1.15 to $64.43. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours at 74.70 US. Today's market numbers are brought to you by The Meat Box, your local butcher where quality matters.
Recapping one of our top stories today, Mayor Chris Bierman shares his main concerns on a local level about EMS dispatch being centralized. He says that the bottom line is to ensure EMS services in Lethbridge are available and response times aren't affected. Coming up after the break, we speak with Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly about some conflicting information surrounding COVID-19. But first, here's a look at what's happening in your community.
Here is your Bridge City News community calendar. Lethbridge Arts Days 2020 is taking place September 24th to the 27th. This is an annual celebration held in conjunction with provincial and national culture days. This year's events and activities will be available online, as well as in person with physical distancing requirements being observed. Connect with artists in our community and come celebrate the arts in Lethbridge. For more information, visit artslethbridge.org. The Center for Suicide Prevention is hosting their third annual Run for Life on Sunday, September 27th. Run for Life is a virtual event this year. Anyone who is passionate about suicide prevention is welcome to join for a virtual journey from darkness into light. Walk or run to remember your loved one and raise awareness for suicide prevention. For details, visit Center for Suicide Prevention Facebook page and follow the events link. Bring your lunch and enjoy beautiful live music at the same time. Come out October 2nd to the First Friday Lunch and Listen concert series featuring performances by the University of Lethbridge Conservatory of Music in CASA's community room beginning 12:15 p.m. and ending at 1. First Friday events are an initiative brought to you by the Heart of Our City Committee. For a full listing of upcoming events, visit firstfridaylethbridge.com. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Many Canadians were not that impressed with the Liberals' throne speech. They say it was a lot of pomp and ceremony and not much else. The Conservative Party of Canada said they're already not going to support it. Joining me now to talk about it and the big speech is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly. Brian, the Liberals made a few promises, including creating 1 million new jobs. But let me ask you something. Are all of those new jobs in government?
Well, you might be worried about that, especially if you remember what happened with Rachel Notley and the Alberta NDP. That's where the job creation went when they decided, well, we've got to increase jobs, have the government hire everybody. I mean, they are talking about a national pharmacare program and a national childcare program and a national long-term care strategy. My view on this is the biggest beneficiaries, if they go through, will be bureaucrats in Ottawa micromanaging bureaucrats in provinces who actually administer these programs. Look, you mentioned pomp and circumstance. I love the pomp and circumstance of a throne speech. I've covered many of them. I remember Michaëlle Jean, and there was Haitian singing and dancing as she walked down the hall in one. I remember military tribute showing up at others. First Nations smudge ceremonies. There's always a lot of, and then, you know, the usher of the black rod and the mace being carried and MPs wandering down the hall. I love all of that, but have some substance in your speech. Instead, what we got were rehashed over Liberal campaign promises. I mean, some of them they have literally been campaigning on since the 1980s, and this government has been in power for 5 years now. So don't turn around and tell me you're going to do this stuff that your party's been promising since I was in high school.
Now, Brian, many journalists across the country were not too impressed with the Prime Minister taking over the airwaves, saying the Liberal Party should have really paid for that airtime.
Yeah, I mean, for people that don't understand how this works, this wasn't just the Prime Minister saying, I'm going to hold a news conference, and then the broadcast network saying, oh, we're going to carry what the Prime Minister has to say. This is the Prime Minister requesting that the networks give him the airtime, that it is handed over. And this is only supposed to be done for issues of great national importance. To show you how upset the broadcasters are, Global went out publicly telling the Globe and Mail, we received assurances that this was from the Prime Minister's office, that this was a speech of national importance and it wasn't going to be political. Well, it was a very political speech, but it was not of national importance. Everything he said about COVID-19, he's said before, or we've heard from our various premiers, local medical health officers, and the like. And then when he started rehashing his campaign promises that were included in the throne speech, that's when it got super political. I'm not sure that it would be wrong for the broadcasters to send him a bill, but I'll tell you this, it may have backfired because Aaron O'Toole and Yves-François Blanchet got up and did their responses despite both of them dealing with COVID, and they did quite well. He gave the opposition airtime they wouldn't have received otherwise.
Now, Brian, as we mentioned before, the Tories are not supporting the throne speech. The Bloc is not excited about it either. But it appears as though Jagmeet Singh and the NDP may be willing to support the Liberals as long as the Liberals come through with some of those promises right away, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. So does this mean there will be no fall election?
Well, not yet. I mean, there's a lot of hurdles to get through, but in principle, the NDP say that they're going to support the throne speech. And then we've got to get down to, as they say, the devil in the details. So the NDP, their requests were two. We want paid sick days for people. The federal government can't regulate that across the entire country. They can only regulate that within workplaces that, like a broadcasting center, that is a federally regulated workplace. A trucking company, banks, but your local retail store, schools, things like that, they can't touch that. But the government has told the NDP, we'll work with you on your big ask, which is not lowering as they transition the CERB from one program into something else, that there isn't a reduction in the money that people get. I think it was going to go from $2,000 a month down to $1,600, and now the government's saying, okay, we'll leave it at $2,000.
Now, how is Parliament meeting since prorogation has ended? Are all the MPs back in the House, even during the pandemic?
No, there were a lot of discussions back and forth about that. Some like, Shannon Stubbs, Lakeland MP in Alberta, she said, look, if the kids are back in school, MPs can be back in the House of Commons. There have been measurements done that show they could even keep 6 feet apart and fit all MPs in the House of Commons because they're not letting the public in. You know, the tours that were a regular feature when you and I were on the Hill, Hal, those aren't happening now. So you're not, the gallery's not filled with school kids aghast at what they see in question period. It's not filled with dignitaries. Those are empty. So the MPs would be able to take over the gallery and space themselves out. But the Liberals said no, they didn't want that. So it's still a hybrid model. Some MPs are taking part through video conference, and they're working out how to do electronic voting. So these are the things that are going on back and forth. There was a push during these negotiations for how the House should come back to not have committees reconstitute themselves until November. The Liberals didn't want the committees back because they don't want the WE scandal back. But they kind of snookered themselves. 2 days after they prorogued the House is when they brought forward this idea that we're going to change the CERB into something else. Well, that requires a committee to review the legislation on that, and therefore the committees will start up in early October to review legislation, but also to deal with things like the WE scandal. So finance, ethics, the government operations and official languages committee are going to start looking at WE again.
So, Brian, let's circle back to CERB for just a moment here. The Trudeau Liberals said one of the things they want happen is the passage of a bill to change the CERB payment into permanent assistance for Canadians. Could they have not have done that over the past month if they had not have prorogued?
Oh, thank you for pointing out the obvious, Al. Yes. I mean, they announced they're proroguing the House on August 18th. On August 20th, they said, we've got this big, important piece of legislation and we want it passed. And then on Thursday, the day after the throne speech, they said, we're really concerned about getting this passed. Canadians need this assistance now. Well, just the way the House of Commons operates, it's going to take a while to get passed. They could have been doing that for the last month. We found out during the speech from the throne that the only reason that they prorogued the House of Commons was to shut down the committees. There was nothing new in the throne speech. There was nothing urgent that required them to prorogue Parliament back in August. And to be quite frank, if they wanted to deliver a throne speech, if you buy the Prime Minister's message that things have changed since the last election, and they undoubtedly have with the pandemic, they could have prorogued the House on September 22nd and come back on the 23rd. Here at the Ontario legislature, they have prorogued in the morning and had a throne speech in the afternoon because they didn't want to interrupt the work of government, but the government of the day said, okay, we're halfway through our mandate, we want to reset. These are all legitimate things. They shut down a month ago and stopped MPs from debating things like this legislation to give Canadians support so that they could get rid of the bad headlines.
Brian, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says it would be wrong for Ottawa to intervene and push through rapid COVID-19 tests being used by other countries. Why is that?
Well, Health Canada is feeling a lot of pressure from premiers, especially Ontario Premier Doug Ford, to say, look, our allies are using these tests already. These have been approved in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in the European Union, in Japan. These are our closest allies that we share everything with. Why have they been using them for months and we're not? And I know that there's an increase in requests for testing across the country. Ontario, which is doing the largest number of tests, went from having testing centers like the one around the corner from me that had no lineup, people sitting empty, to having lineups that last 7 hours. So a dramatic, new interest as cases started to increase, as school went back. And the premiers are all saying, look, these could clear our backlog. These could also keep our schools safer, especially some of the rapid tests that are easier on children. Instead of a swab going up your nose or all the way to the back of your throat, there are different ways of doing it. Health Canada should be approving these. If all of our allies, similar countries, similar health systems, are able to do this, why is it taking months? And why can they not even give any sort of idea on when this will happen? But Chrystia Freeland says, no, we've got to make sure that they're safe. Well, if they've been used for months in Japan, the United States, Britain, and continental Europe, I'm pretty sure that we can be assured that they're safe and that they work.
Now, it appears as though we may be seeing a second COVID-19 wave. Active cases appear to be on the rise in Alberta, British Columbia, and as you mentioned, a dramatic rise in Ontario lately. Brian, how much is this due to the increase in testing by the various health authorities?
It's a mixture of both. Dr. Theresa Tam admitted that during a news conference earlier this week. They were releasing new modeling from the federal government. There's two things that are happening. Yes, an increase in tests. And as she said, when you test more, you will find more cases. Ontario, for example, went from 3,000 cases or 3,000 tests a day back in March, then up to about 20,000. Now it's hovering between 30 and 40,000 a day, and they're moving up to 50,000. So yes, they are, of course, going to find more people who are positive. But there is also an increase in what's called the RT value. This is the transmission rate. So for each person who becomes infected, how many people do they infect? At the beginning of this pandemic, it was as high as 10 in some areas. So you got infected, Hal, you would infect 10 people before you knew what was going on. We were able across most of the country to get that down below 0. And outside of hotspots, it likely is below 0. I mean, there's certain public health units in this country that don't have any active cases, but it's sitting at about 1.4 right now. So for every one person that gets infected, they infect another 1.4 people. That means the virus is growing, it's spreading. So that's worrisome. It's a combination of both. So we need to be concerned about the increase in cases, but we don't have to panic because there's a mixture of two things going on. And also at this point, hospitalizations, intensive care units, ventilators, all those things are not heading up in the same way that we saw them back in April and May across the country.
Let me ask you something. Have you been tested yourself personally?
I have not. I know many people that have, and none of them say that it's a very pleasant thing. I might wait until they come up with this thing that they've started in BC, the mouth rinse that they're using on school kids. I'll wait for that test. I'll wait for the one for 5-year-olds.
Okay. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, we will not be able to get together for Thanksgiving, Brian, but may have a shot at Christmas. He also mentioned that we're in a second wave, but apparently that's not the same message as his medical officials. Is there maybe some miscommunication going on here?
You know, he's doing a thing that a lot of politicians have done that really irks me. I understand trying to make sure that the public is aware of what's going on. I don't like the idea of downplaying what's going on, but I also don't like them scaring the public. Dr. Theresa Tam was asked on Tuesday whether are we in a second wave? She wouldn't say that. She was pressed. She wouldn't say it. The very next day, the Prime Minister is on national TV saying we're in a second wave. I know that some local medical experts, the Chief Medical Officer of Ottawa has said that they're in the second wave, despite the fact that they have fewer cases than Toronto, based on population, based on per capita, they're doing much worse. It's one of the hotspots for the whole country. So yes, localized, you could say that, but I don't think that the Prime Minister should be going on national television and saying that to the entire country. It sends the wrong message. And, few people pointed out to me, the last time he told us we couldn't get together with our families for a holiday, he did the exact opposite. If you remember his trip to the family cottage, the Prime Minister's official cottage residence at Easter, after telling us not to do that very thing the day before.
Political reporter Brian Lilly joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Marriage is hard at the best of times, and now with the pressures of the COVID-19 pandemic, some might find it even more difficult. Today's guest is a marriage coach and a court-appointed mediator. Ron Price is also the author of Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home: How to Enjoy Peaceful Relationships with the Important People in Your Life. Welcome, Ron. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh, Jeanette, the pleasure's mine. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Okay, so Ron, that's an interesting book title. What's the significance of this analogy?
Actually, Jeanette, it's the second book in the series, second of three. In 2016, I came out with Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work. And in all of my books, the play is an acronym, a four-step model to prevent trivial, insignificant, meaningless things from blowing up on you and becoming a conflict. Can I assume you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. I think we all do. Yeah.
Not only were they not a hill to die on, they weren't a hill to get sick on, and yet they're taking over our time, our energy, our lives. So the play is, how do you prevent those from happening at work, at home? And again, in November, I'm coming out with At Church, which is a whole different matter. But how do you prevent conflict? The nice is, how do you resolve conflict? Significant differences that, Jeanette, we're all going to have with other people from time to time. How do you resolve those in a productive manner? So, in the sandbox, I've just never grown up, I guess. People ask me, where did I grow up? I say, I'm trying to do it in Farmington, New Mexico. So it's just kind of playful and helping people realize conflict can be prevented at times. It can be resolved when necessary.
And like you said, I mean, whether it's at church or home or at work, we're all human, right? And so we have those interactions daily. And it's a challenge, right? Sometimes.
It's fun, though, isn't it? It's fun.
Absolutely. Now, Ron, you're a court-appointed mediator. Can you share what your experience has been with couples who maybe put their kids first above, I guess, their spouse?
Yeah, they end up divorced. That's and I shouldn't be laughing. That's not funny, but it's incredible how many couples have told me, yeah, we put our kids first. We stopped focusing on the marriage. Jeanette, if you really want to put your kids first, you get some very good, reliable sitters, or you get other couples with kids the age of your kids, and you trade off so that you're going out on regular dates. You're going out and focusing on the marriage because, number one, that's what your kids, they want to be able to come home after they've left and grown up. They want to bring their kids to your home to see both grandparents together. So if you want to put the kids first, you want to focus on the kids, you focus on the marriage.
Interesting. And I'm sure that sets a really good example too for the kids in the long run.
Oh, absolutely. Point.
Now, most people say that finances are the number one reason for divorce, but you say it's something else, that it's failure to cut the apron strings with your own parents. Please explain that.
We come into a marriage, Jeanette, with certain expectations based largely on how things were in our family of origin. That's all we know, so that's how we assume things should be in our new married home. Well, guess what? Your spouse didn't grow up in your home. At least, I hope not. That's a whole nother topic. They have a different set of expectations. And so one of the challenges in marriage is to carve out not yours or mine, but ours. And you've got to leave mom and dad. You can't be running back to them whenever there's a dust up or a disagreement or whatever. The smart in-laws, when they see you coming under those circumstances, are going to slam that door in your face and say, you go back and fix it, then come visit us. Marriage, you've got to become an us. It's just us. I don't want to say against the world because it's not a negative thing, but no, we're putting a hedge of protection. Nobody's going to tell us what to do. They can give advice if they want, that's fine, but we're making our decisions. We're not doing it our parents' way. We're doing it our way. And if you don't do that, boy, you're just setting yourself up for nonstop trouble.
Right. That's a good one. Now, the marriage flame tends to dwindle over time, unfortunately. What's your advice for a marriage that might have grown stale?
Okay. Actually, Jeanette, can I depress your audience for a moment? That flame that you're talking about, that gaga, euphoric, that lasts 2 years or less.
Oh, wow.
2
That
years
is
or less.
depressing.
Biochemically, you cannot sustain that euphoric love. It's supposed to settle in to a more steady, stable, and long-lasting love. And so one of the problems that people fall into is they forget the importance of having fun in their relationship. You know, when they first meet, that's all they're doing. They're having fun. They're doing things, and they say, "Oh, let's do this forever," and they marry, and they still have fun. But over time, and especially when that again the gaga wears off, life becomes raising the kids and paying the bills, or is it paying the kids and raising the bills? Whichever. Fun gets pushed to the wayside, and that's a huge mistake. In fact, in my play nice model, the P stands for play, play, play. You've heard the expression, the family that prays together stays together. Okay.
Sure.
That for the theologians. I'm saying the family that plays together, has regular date nights, just as a couple, and fun nights as a family, is going to experience the joy longer, keep the flame, as you said, burning more brightly.
Right. And doesn't it seem that the common courtesies that we extend to strangers sometimes get missed in our own marriage? Where are some of these, and why do we neglect them at times?
You know, Jeanette, how much time do we have? Do we have about 3 hours?
No.
But the point is valid. We're at the grocery store and somebody puts groceries in our bag. We say thank you. And they typically say you're welcome. We say please to people, that total strangers that we don't know. But we neglect that at home. I think we just kind of take people for granted to an extent. And when we ask for something, don't just ask, say please. When somebody does something for you, say thank you. When somebody thanks you, say you're welcome. This is not rocket science. This is not earth-shaking. But you know what? Those little things, Jeanette, they do add up over time and help people want to serve more, love more, encourage more. Yeah, remember your P's and T's. I've heard the expression "mind your P's and Q's." I don't know what that means. I don't know what the Q's are. Mind your P's and T's. Your pleases, your thank yous, your welcomes. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah, good advice. Now, in your book, you define marriage as two imperfect people who join together to try to form a perfect union. Can you explain this?
Well, that's what it is, but what's the chances of that, Jeanette? I don't know if you're a betting woman or not, but again, you take two imperfect, hurting individuals who have needs that they're not good at voicing at times. That's a whole nother matter. And they expect the other person to understand and meet those needs nonstop. You're dreaming. You're dreaming. It's not going to happen. Imperfect people cannot create perfect relationships. And especially, as you said in the beginning, under this COVID-19, when we're having more time together, we've got the added stress and the uncertainty and perhaps financial challenges. Yeah, imperfect people, you're going to see the flaws and the faults and the shortcomings in your mate. So if I may, Jeanette, could I cite the L chapter real quickly? I think it fits well here.
Sure.
The L chapter is look for the good. Again, you ask my wife to list Ron's top 10 faults, it might take her 10 seconds, maybe 1 second per fault. You ask her to write down Ron's top 10 good qualities, his positives. Well, depending on the mood, depending if we're in harmony together, it won't take her very long. If we're not in harmony, it might take her a while to think about the good. So force yourself. Look for the good. Look for the good, and your mate, your children, let them know, I really appreciate this about you. Thank you so much. You're going to start seeing more of it, I promise.
That's nice advice. Now, we all know the phrase forgive and forget, of course, but you say that that's unrealistic. Why is that?
Yeah. Jeanette, I don't know about Canada, and I'm looking for an opportunity to say the word oot, because I love the way you folks say oot. In Canada, when you were young, did you hear an expression, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Do you remember what age you found out that was a total lie? Words.
Pretty young.
Yeah. Words can be very hurtful. Well, another expression we've learned from way back is forgive and forget. Jeanette, we can't do it. Now, you're young enough, this won't be a challenge for you, but I ask people my age to think back to their first or second grade teacher. Let me put you on the spot. Can you recall the name of your first or second grade teacher?
Yeah, I can actually.
When's the last time you thought of that person?
It's been a little while.
Yeah, thanks.
But yeah.
But look how quickly you were able to access that information.
Yeah.
Our brains are such, God made our brains in such a way we don't forget anything. We may not be able to recall it when we want to. I promise you that one. But every memory, everything that's ever happened to us is in the emotional part of our brain, and something can trigger a memory to bring it right back to the surface with all the power and the pain and the impact. So to say forgive and forget, I might as well say forgive and eat this building. It's not going to happen. The trick, if you will, the challenge is forgive and move on. Purposely decide, you know what? Nope, I have forgiven that. And if I have thoughts come into my mind, I'm deleting them because I have chosen to forgive and move on.
It's an action, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
It's a decision and an action. Yes, well put.
So most of us who are married are either trying or have tried to change our spouse, but you say that this is a waste of energy.
Well, Jeanette, I didn't ask you, but are you married, Jeanette?
I am, yes.
Ever tried to change your spouse?
I think everybody's guilty of it a little bit, right? At times.
I was going to say, you don't have to answer that. I was watching the Today Show. This is probably last century, last millennium. It was a long time ago. And I was just about to shuttle off and go back to work. And they said, in our next segment, an animal trainer is going to come on and explain how she used animal training techniques to change her husband. And I said, oh, this is going to be good.
Yep.
So I stayed and I watched it. And I can't remember her name. I would give credit if I could. But she said, when we train animals, we look for those behaviors that we like, those behaviors that we want to see more of, and we reward them. We give them food or compliments, praise, what have you. We let them know, yeah, that's good. We see more of it. She said, I started doing that with my husband. She said, when I saw him doing something that I appreciated, I let him know in no uncertain terms, wow, thank you. Man, I like that. Not over the top, come on, but realistic. I appreciate that. And she said, you know what? And he began to change. But then Jeanette, she looked right in the camera and she said, oh, was it I who had changed?
Probably.
Jeanette, I did a dance in my office. It was her. She changed because when your mate knows you're trying to change them, the walls of defense are going to go right up. You know that. We all know that. So when you stop trying to change and you look for the good and let them know you appreciate it, they'll change on their own, which is far, far better than coercive change.
You mentioned an acronym HALT, H-A-L-T. Maybe tell us about that.
Okay. Yeah, it's universal that we are not always at our best. We like to think we are, but we're not. So if you're hungry, and trust me, you're not going to be in total control of your emotions, your thoughts, whatever, because your emphasis is on your appetite at the moment, your stomach. If you're angry, you're not at your best. You have left your thinking brain, you're in your emotional brain. You got to be careful. If you're feeling lonely or maybe your needs aren't being met, if you're tired, so hungry, angry, lonely, tired, that's I don't say a bad state to be in. We get there from time to time, but it's a horrible state in which to try to communicate with another human being, especially your spouse. Because if you're under that condition, you're tense, you're irritable, you'll take things the wrong way. That's when you need to know the secret of calling a timeout the correct way. Jeanette, did you know there's a right way to call a timeout and a wrong way to call a timeout?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know the secret ingredient there.
Well, may I share it with your audience?
Sure.
Thank you. I was hoping you'd say yes.
Of course.
We have a part of our brain that thinks right in the front, the frontal lobe. It's the command center of the brain, if you will. Our thoughts, reason, logic come from that part of the brain. We also have the limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain. And what can happen to us as human beings, Jeanette, is we can get so upset about something, so agitated, so irritated, we will leave the thinking part of our brain, get smack dab in that emotional brain, and when that happens, all bets are off. So at that time, you have to call a timeout. You have to announce to the other person, right now, I can't do it. I'm too upset. If we try to talk now, I'm going to say something or do something I don't say or do. Timeout. But Jeanette, here's the key. You've got to announce the time in. In other words, if I say to my wife, time out, and I storm out, I've made it worse, not better, because I've left her wondering, well, is he coming back? Is he rejecting me? Is he rejecting marriage? She doesn't know. So I need to say one of two things. I need to say, I need a timeout, or I think we need a timeout. How about if we get back together in a half an hour? Pick this up at 2:00. Let's talk about this after dinner. So I'm letting her know I'm rejecting the argument. I'm not rejecting her
That's right.
or the marriage. And two real keys, by the way. I can say I need a timeout, or I think I need a timeout. God forbid I ever tell my wife I think you need a timeout. I think
That's not going to go over
I'll
so
find
well.
out she does. Yeah, no, that won't go over well.
Yeah, no, that is really fantastic advice. Probably something that we can all use, whether we're married or not.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Jeanette. If I may, when I wrote "Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Work," people think, well, I don't work, so I don't need that. 100%, 100% of the skills that I teach in the At Work book are applicable. Probably 80% of the At Home book are applicable at work. And probably 50 or 60% of the At Church book, they're relationship skills. They're going to be applicable at home and at work. Because, like I think you said it earlier, relationships are relationships. We got to learn how to get along.
Exactly. Ron, thank you so very much for joining us today. We really enjoyed having you on our show.
Jeanette, I'm just sorry it's come to an end. I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you so much.
Ron Price is the author of Play Nice in Your Sandbox at Home. From all of us here at BCN, thank you for watching.